morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Chiara Daikowitz. I'm the president of Materially. And I don't know how many of you know Materially. Let me tell you a couple of words. We are a consulting company focusing on innovative and sustainable materials. We have been around for about 21 years, I think, in Milano. And that was, we were born as something different. We were born as Material Connection Milano, and becoming afterwards Material Collection Italy. And a couple of years ago, we rebranded into Materially, but we still kept a very strong connection with our original mother, represented here by Jennifer Gumpert. I'm going to get to that very shortly, which is Material Connection, a world-renowned material library and database. They were probably the first one scouting for innovative, performative, and not so easy to find at that time materials that would be used in all kinds of designs, from fashion to automotive to architecture. So this is more or less who we are and why are we here. We're here, of course, because of the Design Week. Materially has organized several events during this week. Apart from this talk, we have two exhibitions, one going on at Super Studio. It's called Wonder Matters, and the other one, Vivarium, at the Academy of Brera. We only focus on materials, so in both exhibitions you will see very interesting materials coming from different origins and to be applied to different industries. We give a point of view on where materials are going to go, and that's why we are also organizing this talk right now. The last thing we have during the Design Week is a presence of Material Connection Library at Salone so we can give you all the details. It's in Pavilion 18. And a similar talk will be duplicated there tomorrow if you're not going to get enough of and Jennifer today. So coming to this morning, as mentioned, Jennifer Gumpert, Vice President of Operation Material Connection, and Anna Pellizzari, Executive Director and Head of Research at Materially, are going to introduce us to a very interesting topic, which is, well, that's all here. I'm not going to say anything more to that, and welcome, Jen. Thank you, Anna. I give the mic to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. As Chiara was so kind enough to introduce me, my name is Jennifer Gumpert. I'm the VP of Business Operations at Material Connection in New York. Anna?
And I'm Anna Pellizzari. I'm Executive Director and Head of Research and Consulting at Materially.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So Chiara did a wonderful job kind of introducing the concept of what Materially and Material Connection focuses on. But to give you a little bit of a sense contextually of why are we here. Material-minded design is the idea that ultimately everything we do in design has a component of materials to it. And when you think about sustainability, there is no sustainability without material consideration, right? What goes into it? Where is it coming from? What are the origins? Those types of things. So over the last number of years, Material Connection and Materially and the work that we do with our clients have obviously seen a significant shift in the way that product development, R&D, research and development, are starting to look at the way that we build products across every industry. That would include furniture, any materials for interior design applications, the chairs you sit on, the desks you work at, the clothes you wear, the shoes you run in, etc., the car you use to get to the grocery store, right? Or the buses or metros that you use. We're actually working on a metro project right now. So as you think about that, you realize that materials are really part of that process very fundamentally. What we're seeing in product development now is that the conversation, how we go about creating products, the teams that are involved in that process is changing, right? 10 years ago, your design team would come up with these beautiful ideas, and they'd hand it off to engineering, and engineering would be like, no. It's not gonna work. Start over. And then it would go through this cycle, right? Okay, now it gets through engineering, and it gets to procurement, and procurement's like, no, too expensive. Start over. And you would go through these cycles over and over and over again, right? Now, with economic pressure and consumer pressure, there are a lot of different levers and considerations in product development process that's changing. So now the conversation is involving different members of that process in a very different way. And what we see happening is that materials are being included in that design conversation in a way that is very different than what we saw 10 years ago. So with that, we're now looking at material-minded design. We've come to the point where we are now looking at trend forecasting. What are we seeing coming? Consumer expectations. What are people going to expect from our products? The experiences, durability, sustainability, transparency. What's happening in the future? What do we need to go toward? What are the aspects of that that need to meet sustainability requirements? And what are the materials that we're going to use to help us achieve it? So we're looking at this in a very holistic way, and it's changing the way that product development is starting to come together. So that's where Materially and Material ConneXion come into play. We are helping those companies create this process faster, less expensive, with fewer mistakes, right? Because mistakes are extremely costly and no one has the time anymore. So before we jump into the trend forecast of this, I'd like to give you a sense of what these forecasts really look like and what goes into them. So the first thing that we look at in these forecasts is the socio-cultural trends. What are we seeing in art, music, politics, economics, pop culture? What are we seeing that people are latching onto, and how are those things going to change what they expect, right? It's the idea that one small thing can create a ripple effect that becomes ubiquitous. It becomes incorporated in what our expectations are as consumers. So we start with the socio-cultural, the macro trend. These are typically brought to us through a relationship we have with a semiotician. They look at signs and symbols that are indicating where things are going across all industries. The next step is innovation concept. How are those going to manifest themselves? What are the recommendations going to be that those in product development should use as guidance to bring them to where consumers will be in 2, 5, 10 years? And the next is design ideation. What will be the aesthetic application of this, right? So we've seen how it's going with the umbrella. What are people going to expect from that? How is it going to manifest itself visually and creatively? What is it going to look like? Colors, textures, the feel, what does it evoke? Those types of things. And then that last step, and the thing that makes Material ConneXion and Materially's application of this really unique, is what materials are going to achieve it. Now, the reason why we do this now is because one of the things that we've heard over and over from our clients is that they use trend forecasting to set the tone and the direction of where they're going, and then they have no idea what to do next, right? Because there's such a gap between the science of how to make something, materials, there's a huge gap between materials and the trend. So we're supporting that now. We're looking at how do those materials really apply. What materials can you use right now that are available that will help you achieve these aesthetic directions? And so you can see that really shortens that timeline. All right, so we'll jump in. So what we are going to be talking about today in our trend forecasting, this is just a preview of a very bigger report, but we've pulled the things that we thought would be most applicable to our audience today. We are looking at what is called the cultural mashup, or mashup culture. The idea here is that we're seeing younger generations driving a revival of 80s, 90s, and Y2K, as there's an appetite for nostalgia and vintage pieces. We're seeing everything from Memphis design inspirations, old school emojis, primitive internet aesthetics, bright colors, neons, things like that. Anyone in this room that is age 35 or older? older knows exactly what I'm talking about, and probably some of us are rolling our eyes. I know I am definitely rolling my eyes, because there was nothing glamorous about the 90s, and yet, all the kids are wearing my clothes, or wearing the clothes of the kids I wanted the clothes of when I was in the 90s. And the reason why we're seeing this happen is because there is a sense of innocence that existed in the 80s and 90s, 2000s, when there was this promise of wonderment that came with the internet, but without all of the social pressure of social media, right? This idea of keeping up. It was this wonderful open field of exploration without all the dangers associated with it. That's part of it. The second part of it is this idea that they were not yet tainted or afraid of what was coming in the global climate crisis, right? It was this beautiful, innocent time before everything was dying and everyone's going to be dead, right? So there's this safety net there. It was the period right before all of that happened. And that's kind of the explanation of why we're seeing these trends really come back to the forefront. So we break this up into a couple of different areas. These are the kind of the micro trends within the macro trend. And the first is vintage core. So obviously with the recent Y2K revival, it proves that, if anything, everything from fashion, and particularly in fashion, eventually comes back in style, including banana clips and scrunchies and all of those things that were terrible, the slap bracelets. Comes back in style, and it's all the rage. Shows like Stranger Things really has proven, and also kind of accelerated, this adoption of these nostalgic time periods. This also includes things like thrift shopping, which we'll talk more about, and I have an error on my computer, which I'm going to yell at my IT team about. So we're seeing that also included in thrift shopping. We'll talk about that more a little bit later in the presentation. I'm not going to go through all of these. These are just a couple of different ways, things that we're seeing about how this is manifesting itself. What is really driving it? What are people latching onto? And what are we seeing them use and leverage? So I'm going to talk about just two of these up here. The first is Before the Matrix. This is actually the master costume designer, Richard Burton, who worked on a little-known cult classic called Hackers, recently released a set of Polaroids. And we're seeing this happen a lot with the 80s and 90s shows that have come out, this idea of like, ooh, trendy Polaroids. But they're all digging through their closets and realizing that they have these never-before-released imageries, and so they're sharing them out now. That's really being latched onto. It's paying homage to the thing that made him popular and kind of his best piece. But it's also lending inspiration to our younger generation. And the second part of this is Thrift Mafia Saving the Planet. This is driven mostly by the popularity of vintage. We're calling out here that, for example, Depop actually sold in 2021 for an astonishing 1.63. Yep, my eyesight's going because I'm over 40. $1.63 billion, it goes too fast. $1.63 billion in 2021. That's an astonishing number. Why? Because it's telling us that there is motivation there, right? The reason the price has gone up is because a lot of people are interested in it. Vintage is being driven now not just by the fact that you can go down to your local thrift shop, but you can also now shop for vintage products online. And we're seeing a lot of momentum behind that. This is primarily driven by the younger generation that is interested in making sure that we're not contributing to additional waste in our streams. Also to make sure that we're not creating excess for no reason. And the idea that if you reuse, you're going to be saving a lot of that. So we're seeing a lot of that. The other two, I'm sure you've had a chance to read. Revisiting Club Culture has to do with the Spanish club scene in the 90s and late 80s. Really interesting there. We're seeing a new TV show in 2022. And the other one is the 90s mood board, which is, of course, all of our favorite 80s and 90s celebrities releasing these Polaroids and kind of acting as inspiration for all of the things. The second part is digital and creative mashup. So the idea here is looking at the ways that artificial intelligence is really driving and supporting a lot of the things that are coming down the pipe. But we're doing this in a way through generative AI in 2023, which has a tremendous amount of momentum, and it is not going to change. We're going to see a lot more come up in the next 5 years or so. They're using this to create a fusion of avant-garde and vintage aesthetics. This has exploded online, and I'm sure you're seeing a lot of AI that's happening now in visual. It's creating a blurred reality, or a blurring a variety of references into the same imagery, and it really pulls in that lo-fi and retro elements. And the two things I'm going to focus on here is the Diana reincarnate. This is actually, interestingly, they used AI to generate a photo shoot. They took a ton of images of Diana, they blended them all together, and then created a photo shoot that could have existed beyond her time, or could have existed in the time, but she didn't participate in. So this was actually something from Adidas and Trendland, who collaborated on the AI generation, and it was a virtual photo shoot that never took place, but looks like it could have. The second thing I want to talk about is history of gaming. So there's this traveling show called Game On that really celebrates, it's a touring exhibition that celebrates the history of computer games, the design language that was developed during that time period, and the genesis of 3D environment, right? If you think back during 8-bit, 16-bit, back all that, those were the first times that we were able to create or explore or work inside of a three-dimensional space, as opposed to like Contra and Mario when we were going in 2 dimensions, just right across the page. So this installation really celebrates that. It's developed by Spanish studio Smart and Green, and the exhibit showcases pictographic neon elements. It makes you feel like you're kind of walking back in time, and those neon elements are interacting rhythmically and geometrically in their environment to different sounds. So it's really interesting. If you ever see it, you should take a peek at it. Now we'll head into our innovation concept. So how is that going to manifest itself? What are we seeing that's actually acting as evidence for this? I'll give just 2 very brief examples. Seen here, and first is Back to the Future, right? 80s, maybe 3 of them. So we're exploring, when we're talking to clients about Back to the Future, what we're doing is we're offering and making recommendations of what they should do in order to align their brands with what the trend is indicating and showing the consumer expectation will be. So we're recommending here that we explore the aesthetic inspirations and culture movements of the 80s and 90s and transform modern technology into old school gaming consoles, play with those vintage reinterpretations, and upgrade your nostalgic elements. We use the past as inspiration to hybridize the products of tomorrow, and we see that through things like the T4 collection by Holloway Lee and Uma Objects, and the Gamify concept in Game Boy-inspired accessories for the Apple Watch from Daydream Studio. So those are just 2 examples of products that we've seen that are really kind of paying homage to this space and giving us a clear sightline and clear direction. Now what I'd like to do is pass over to Anna, and Anna's going to share with us some of the material technologies that we're seeing that are that lend themselves to this, that give us the opportunity to make those products.
Thank you, Jennifer. Also, I'm here to talk about the tangible side of it.
Yeah.
Very practical kind of stuff, which is part of my work every day. So we selected this material because it is a 3D printing technique involving ceramics, extremely accurate, and we selected it because, especially this particular object, it would connect some very contemporary and present way of manufacturing things with a type of design language that dates back, I would say, to the 80s that we were talking about. Those type of funny language and playful and sort of informal way of treating designs, but these type of shapes were already developed at that time using traditional techniques, since 3D printing was not existing then. And what's interesting is that the possibility of using 3D printing, for instance, also allows to elaborate on this type of language, changing it and exploiting the opportunities of additive manufacturing by creating new shapes that wouldn't be possible with a traditional way of manufacturing ceramics. So it's an interesting mixture of past suggestions, vintage suggestions, and contemporary ways of translating that language into an object via a new technology. So the next,
yeah. So the next one, we go into the next, but I'd love to just touch on something before we go forward. What's really interesting about this is if you think about all the benefits of 3D printing in terms of rapid prototyping, in terms of personalization, right? These are also things that you've seen we're really looking for, right? We're looking for personalization. It feels something precious to us. All of those things are going to give you, this technology is going to give you those things in addition to what we're seeing in magic culture. So I just wanted to make that note.
Yeah, we will see other 3D printing examples, because it's so interesting to see how, once you step ahead of the wonder of this new technology and you would start using it in using languages that can be any type of language, not just strictly those that are directly related to 3D printing.
So the next innovation concept is what we call low-tech audacity. The idea here is that we're driving our clients to, or encouraging our clients to take inspiration from low-tech vintage designs and devices, and then flip them with playful colors and innovative layouts. The idea here is to invest in simplified product experiences that help consumers disconnect from their always-on lifestyle. It offers privacy, it offers reliability and sustainability through timeliness aesthetics, robust shapes, and unobtrusive social media. Some examples that we see here, what we're saying is revamping futurism, which is done really well with the Hamilton PSR Digital Quartz watch. It's a modern take on the Pulsar watch on the brand's 50th birthday. It has kind of that throwback to the 80s and 90s aesthetic in that watch. And then Disco Craze, Fendi's Milan headquarters transformed into a roller disco pinball machine. This was done during Fashion Week last year. I'm not going to attempt the name. Everyone here knows how to pronounce it. I do not. All right. So with that, Anna, let's talk about something.
You will be excused for not pronouncing the right way. So we chose this example, and it is actually one of several examples of lasered wood surfaces. Because it's a combination of a very traditional type of look and feel and touch and also smell that's typical of wood, that would project you into a type of environment mood that's very much natural, traditional, somewhat vintage, but and we're a type of processing the wood surface that's made with it. It's not new technology, but the combination of two makes a material that's sort of create a union, a spark, a new spark that would give wood a different type of language opportunities. And this type of technology has been used recently by several companies proposing different types of surfaces with different types of lasering on the surface for different applications. Visually, you can see that this is neither wood nor high-tech surface. It's sort of a mix, interesting mix of the two. And it also moves wood into a completely different type of potential applications, because you can make shoes out of wood, okay? You can make bags and other types of caps. There was last year during the design week, I remember, a designer from northeast of Italy that would propose this type of lasering to make caps. So it was an interesting way of moving wood from a typically hard types of application into a soft ones. So, anything to add?
No, it's one of my favorite examples. I love what we're seeing happening with wood lasering for sure. All right, the next is creative story blending. So here we're recommending that brands invest in collaboration and cross-fertilize design references to reinvent their storytelling. Kind of the idea of what we're seeing in shoe collabs, this idea that we're bringing in a new aesthetic put toward a really trusted brand, right? We're recommending that they bet on trompe-l'œil. Did I get that right?
Trompe-l'œil.
Okay, because if there's one thing I'm worse at Italian, it's French. Cannot speak French. So looking at those effects, and fearless creativity to mix traditional techniques with contemporary aesthetics. So very mix and match feeling. There I said it, mix and match cultural references and creative techniques to stimulate new narratives. We're seeing some examples of this in Upcycled Templol, which is from the French brand Upcycling and Reviving Forgotten Designs. We think that's Polcha, is how we pronounce that. And so that's a really good example. The other one is a collaborative creativity, which is the rug company's 25th anniversary collaboration with the Sarah Band Foundation. So you can see, especially in the image on the right, which is the blue image, there's a lot of mix and match there, right? Things that we would typically not see put together are being put together in that. Anna, tell us a little bit about Marwolus.
Yeah. So we selected this material, well, first of all, because it's made by an Italian company. So of course we try to privilege our materials.
So sneaky.
And also, yeah, and also because there are two types of mashups and sort of visual and material merge. Basically, it is a material that's made out of marble powder and wool waste that's blended together and combined through by means of a resin. So it's a flat material which can also be worked in a three-dimensional shape, but it's a sort of hybrid material. In general, I can say that the trend for hybridization, so you asked me about French and I asked you about English.
Weird English words.
Yes, collaborative language.
Yeah.
So it's this type of hybridization of materials is having a long time trend. And this is an interesting example of we have a mix of both materials and also to get an unexpected aesthetical result, and also a sort of creative story behind it. So there is the story of using waste, for instance, from the marble industry and from the wool industry, the idea of creating this type of cloudy-like textures using exploiting the effect of marble powder embedded in resin, which is slightly translucent and makes the wool flakes be more or less visible based on the thinness of the material. So there are a lot of things that can be said about this specific material, and this is why we selected it for this trend.
Love that. I'm going through all the different ways it can be used. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about design ideation. This is what we believe, or what we're seeing, what we're expecting, how it's going to manifest itself in the aesthetic, the visual, the colors, the textures, etc. So the first one is modesty. So this is the idea that post-pandemic living has fueled the consumer's need for finding joy through design. It promotes a vividly playful approach that brings consumers back to a more lighthearted and youthful time. We're seeing a lot of color pops and design to help combat that hard feeling that we all experienced through COVID-19. And this is kind of the visual representation of that, right? The words that we use to describe modesty or the design aesthetic behind modesty will be things like quirky, sophisticated, uplifting, sculptural, geometric, and retro future. This where, and particularly too, because of the materials that Anna has shared, it's looking at ways to take materials that are well known to you, but reshape them in a way that might be a little bit more unexpected and brings a little bit of a joy, a little bit of a moment, right? That, I didn't think that it could do that, right? That beautifulness that happens when you, not an aha moment, but a exploration moment. So the materials that we're going to share with you here, and these colors obviously are very grounded, very earthy in their own way, but yet still have a little bit of a spark of creativity. They're not the very, very vivid, bold neons, but they do offer some playfulness in the color. And this is a bit of a departure from what I'm seeing here in Milan, because you guys are further ahead than we are in the US when it comes to fashion. But the colors in store right now are extremely vibrant, right? They're very rich colors. These ones come down just a little bit, a tiny bit more subdued. The materials that we're sharing with you are materials that can help achieve those looks.
Yeah, so basically the concepts that we select, well, there were much more materials. Clearly for this presentation we had to
be here for 4 hours.
select, just to pick some concepts and some materials to make it available in like 45 minutes. But the complete trend report of this topic is much more longer and full of inspirational stuff, just for you to know. We selected these two materials. One, the first is connected to that idea of a wow effect. So again, it is a material that combines the properties of stone and marble and those of a flexible and soft materials. So you would expect from that type of surface, that type of visual look, which is typical of stone, a flat behavior, something that's totally rigid and stiff, while instead this comes in a liquid shape, which means that it can be cast to get also this type of fluid and curved types of shapes. And what's interesting, well, it is a Mexican material, and what's interesting is that it has been developed by a design studio and not by a manufacturer, of course in collaboration with a manufacturer. But again, the idea is that creativity can come to help the creation of new materials. So in this case, the reason of the selection was to translate this wow effect and at the same time also providing some kind of reassurance using this type of stone-like and familiar texture. The other material instead is a knit. So it's like a jersey type of material. It looks completely standard, but it is made of seaweed-based fibers, which has some soothing and relaxing effect on the body. So again, we have the importance of well-being, of using materials that would affect our well-being in a way. In this case, we are talking about physical well-being, so something that's related directly with our body, but there can also be other types of sensorial well-being that come into place.
I'm a huge fan of the liquid stone too, because again, one of the things we're seeing is, in the sense of like, that we were talking about a moment ago, there's also a lot happening right now, and we can even see it at Salone and throughout Design Week, of using materials that are doing something that you almost can't figure out how they did it, right? Oh, I didn't know that stone could do that, or what is that material? Gayatri and I'll introduce Gayatri a little later when we get to Q&A. We were fascinated by this one lighting collection that we saw, because you would stand there saying it's reflective, it looks like glass, but it looks transparent, but it isn't, and is it reflecting me? No, it's not. The trick in the mind, where someone kind of just sits there and says, I don't get it, but I love it. Materials like this really make that possible and create that kind of playground that you can have creatively to achieve something you've never seen before. So that's one of my favorites. And then tell us about Polygood.
Yes.
Our good friends at the Good Polygood.
Yes, we're friends of Polygood. We're very friends of Polygood. Okay, this was selected for its pop-like appearance. It is a board, a series of boards made out of 100% recycled polystyrene from recycling of appliances of so-called WEEE or RAE in Italian, so basically refrigerators and washing machines and dishwashers. The plastic parts of these appliances are ground and recycled in big plants, and then they are reintroduced in the market via various types of products. They make these boards for furniture, retail, interiors, basically applications that are very nice looking and with this like terrazzo type of effect, with interesting colors. And you can see they are exhibiting with us at our Wonder Makers exhibition at Super Studio. So if you want to see more about, and also some practical pieces of furniture made out of this material, you can come and visit us there. And I will also make another recommendation on this trend, which is you were mentioning hologram displays. In terms of wow effect materials, we saw something interesting the other day of this vase. Okay, it's a vase, it's a glass vase, very like traditional looking from the distance, Venetian type of design. Then you get there, you touch it, it moves, and it's made of silicone. It's like moving like this, like jelly type of thing. So it's that type of materials that would trick your mind, as Jennifer was saying. There is a lot of examples like that.
Perfect. If any of you can, you should definitely check out the Wonder Matters. I had the chance to see it yesterday. It was remarkable. It also was packed.
Yes.
And it was interesting because you'll walk through this space and you'll see, oh, nice, oh, beautiful, 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 beautiful. And then you get to this, to Wonder Matters, and it's packed. So go early. All right, perfect. And just a couple more here. So the next is Lo-Fi as the design ideation with programs such as ChatGPT. I always do that. ChatGPT and Midjourney. Climbing to the forefront, artificial intelligence will continue to be a resource and grow in the ranks for the design world. But what does that mean for materiality? So we're looking at elements of retro, but also looking at that low fidelity and kind of paying homage to a simpler time, but with all of these new technologies to help us achieve those outcomes. Here we're seeing a cooler palette. Words we're using to describe this are liquid metal, surreal, digitized, morphing, game-like, and organic shapes. A lot of texture, again, a lot of cool colors, feels a little bit more retro funk. And I love these materials that you've picked, so I'm going to jump right ahead to them.
Yeah, so basically we come again here with 3D printing, with two not completely, they have some similarities. The idea again here is to merge this high-tech type of process, basically, to create structures with very natural and very, the word doesn't come to my mind. So basically the inspiration here is nature. We are having the first material, which is cement somehow, cement-like type of material for big scale 3D printing of structures. And the inspiration of the structure comes from biomimicry, so taking some structures typical of some living organism that would create very important compressional strength, so an ability to be stiff with a low quantity of material and translating that type of construction into building the building. Again, here we have this merge. We are again talking about hybrid material and hybridizations of languages and technologies that would put together something that dates back to what we feel as our intrinsic nature, so something that comes from the past with contemporary technology. And the other example is again 3D printing applied to clay. So another type of very basic and earthy type of material treated in a way that would help create this structure that once put in the sea will help regenerate the coral reef. So here we have a real mix of a lot of interesting topics, from preserving nature, using technology, but at the same time using a material that's extremely traditional and dates back to our roots. Clay is one of the first materials that were used by mankind in a new way and with new purposes. I think that's it. Yes. So this is the last example of materials, and I would like you to have some questions.
Yes.
Maybe some.
We'd love to open the floor if you have any questions.
Anything you would like to discuss about?
Anything at all. This material.
Meaning of life.
The meaning of life. Yes. Yeah. It's a really good question, and I'm thrilled you asked it. It's a little bit of both. So what's interesting, the approach to Material ConneXion and Material ConneXion maintains a database of technologies that help support and feed advisory work, the guidance that we give. So it works in both directions. So the first direction being, we're looking and scouting for materials globally, from suppliers, innovators, men in their garages coming up, women in their garages coming up with ideas, every kind of level. We're also looking at technologies that are in various stages of commercialization. That might be in the research phase, it might be in ideation or prototyping phase, it might be in small scale, large scale, commercially available, mass market, etc. Right? So we're looking all over the place. And what that means is we're actually technologies before anyone knows about them, right? Because they're not getting marketing behind them at that point. We look at different labs. We look at think tanks, startups, incubators, all of it. Once we identify those materials, we now have them in our pocket or in our bag of goodies to be able to make recommendations to clients to say the attributes of this material would solve your problem, right? So when a company says, I'll use an example of a packaging company or a company that works in luxury cosmetics, for example. They have a lot of different elements when it comes to how they design their packages. They're looking at not just what is the look and feel, how premium does it feel, but they also are looking at, can it come into contact with a chemical agent for many, many months? Can it, in the US, can it clearances? What type of tolerances in order to have a screw cap mechanism, right? There's a bunch of different elements that go into primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging. So once we know those challenges, we're looking at materials through the lens of attribute or problem solving and saying, okay, I think this material combined with that material will give you the outcome that you're looking for. Now, the way it works in the other direction is, in terms of how we find things, is that we have a client that's told us they have a challenge, and then we go look, right? So we're pulling from our already base of knowledge, but also using that challenge to go identify new solutions. This flywheel, where it's constantly feeding itself. And we then establish relationships with the manufacturers, suppliers of very raw material, right? The original chemical basis of those materials. Our team has not only researchers who are experienced in the design side of curiosity, but also up to including those with advanced degrees in chemistry, in material sciences, or mechanical engineering. So it's a very expansive way of looking at this, and then you add in that layer of how do you make science designery, right? Designers don't think like scientists, scientists don't think like designers, and I think that's what really makes us really unique, is that we're able to have that conversation left brain, right brain. So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Anyone else?
I would just add that basically the idea is of having a big container of information that's managed by Material ConneXion and that is accessible by subscription. And this is like an asset that can be made available to people, companies, whatever. And then also, and on the other side, a tailor-made type of consulting service that is done on call, basically answering specific questions by our clients with needs with us or with the United States or with the We, as Materially, also have another leg, I would say. We are here, by the way, and which is also being more proactive towards materials manufacturers helping them being more visible in front of potential users of companies that may potentially know about their material. And this is why we are making all these events during the design week. So there are a lot of innovation in the material world, and we would like these innovations to be more visible and be made available to companies that are looking for them. So which is not just bring in the solution when it is asked, but also, okay, here it is. So
manufacturers do not know how to sell, especially the smaller ones, into a design studio or into a designer. They don't have, they get very focused on what it does and not how it could be used, and they don't have that level of creativity. So it's very good work that you guys do. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, it was super interesting. I believe that all attributes materials can have, or actually in everything that you can think of, there's always forces which play one against the other.
Especially in sustainability.
Exactly, and that's actually my question. I mean, from a materials perspective, we see a huge increase in sustainability for materials. But historically, I would say it's individual. You have to trade something.
Always, yeah.
Which is the trade that we are willing to do? Because if it would be as easy as doing exactly the same at the same price, same performance, same haptics, sustainable, the earth will be super healthy. So what are we willing to trade for sustainable?
Yeah, this is what we're trying to do is educate brands on what right. It's a good, fast, and cheap problem. You can only take. The challenge is that corporate understanding. There's also a lot of like razzle dazzle, right? They wanna have a really great story that will compel people to buy. It's a marketing play. But the challenge that we see over and over again is sometimes returning to a more commoditized material, something that's more readily available, instead of over-engineering a solution, which is expensive and sometimes more toxic, is sometimes the best solution. So we're spending a lot of time recently trying to educate brands at the highest level, right, C-suite, board level, to explain to them that sometimes simplest is best, sometimes what you're doing is the best you can do, look in other areas. That is a lot of education. It's not always going to be cheaper, but it will be maybe better. So we're trying to educate as we go and take into account regulation and take into account what they're trying to achieve and what price points they have. But there is this instinct over and over from brands to over-engineer and try to be really fancy about the solution. We're trying to get them to take a step back. What are you already doing? What do you already have? What is simplest and closest in? And then start thinking long-term. And I think part of what caused a lot of the drama is these 2030, 2025 initiatives. And they went out with this big statement, and now all of their teams are scrambling to hurry up and put something in place. But they didn't think through what will it take to do it. Then they went and said they will, right? So for us, it's a lot of education and a lot of changing the conversation and the narrative so that they're having a more sustainable conversation about it, something that can kind of survive past these 2050, 2030 initiatives. Does that answer your question?
I just would like to add something. It's something that you passed by very quickly before, Jennifer, which is we are in general a multidisciplinary team. So at least we as material, but I think also in New York, we are more design-minded, meaning that we can speak at the same time with designers, marketing people, and being able to speak more or less, I wouldn't say the same language, but it's common to all of them. Why usually within the company these functions each other. They hate each other. So we also, and when it comes to sustainability, this is particularly helpful to be able to put together different functions and have them work together and not just in a one-way pull direction when one of the three functions asks the other to provide solutions without being of help. So you know, you work in materials and you know it very well how it works. But this is also one of the assets that we would like to put on the table when we work with